This is What Matters to Me Most with Dr. LJ Punch, trauma surgeon and founder of the TSTL. This is the best of What Matters to Me Most, Part 2.
Hey, so what's most important to me when it comes to the plans of distributing the vaccine is, making sure that the people who need it most get it. And that includes the elderly, the old people. I think about my parents, my dad, and my mom, and who my dad is currently actually in the hospital with COVID, and I think about them all the time. And my mom is isolated, and I just want us to all be together, and with the peace of mind that we're not going to get each other sick. And also, for people to have faith that, the vaccine is good and it's not going to turn them into zombies or anything. And so that we can just all get vaccinated.
I'm Dr. LJ Punch, and this is Virus 101. I've been partnering with PotBangerz over the last many, many months as our region has grappled with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. I want to share with you some thoughts about what we can do to live well in this ongoing era of COVID-19. Before I get into that, let me just start at square one. What is coronavirus? What is a virus at all? It's a really, really strange form of life that we have to understand if we want to know how to protect ourselves from it. So a virus is basically this particle lined with fat. And on the inside of it, it has genetic information, code, a recipe, so that it can make copies of itself. But unlike other forms of life, this package of code, this package of information, has no ability to reproduce itself, make copies of itself, and make energy. It spreads through droplets and the air into our eyes, noses, and mouths, and attaches onto cells that we have in our body. It takes that lining, breaks it open, and injects its code, its genetic information into our cells. Viruses use our bodies and our energy to grow and to spread in a way that is so damaging. But because they're not really alive, they're really hard to kill. They don't have the same things that make them easy to kill like a bacteria does when you can just take a pill or an antibiotic to make it go away. They're like zombies with this life that just uses everything around it to keep going. And because of that, there's really only a couple of ways to fight a virus.
What matters to me most is access.
When it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine, what matters to me most is that everyone who wants to take the vaccine have access.
This is What Matters to Me Most.
What are you hearing people are thinking about, concerned about the most right now?
What people are really wanting is to be in community and to be able to access their breath joyfully. Like, that is the word on the street. That is what I'm seeing with our people and the work that we're doing.
People are more comfortable being unapologetically Black. And I think that it's become more of a celebration. People are opening themselves up to celebrating their Blackness.
People are unapologetically centering their own Blackness. At some point it was like we couldn't say Black. You can't talk about color. You can't talk about the travesty, the trauma that is happening in our community. Now people are centering those things. They're talking about it, and they're figuring out a way. How can I connect with LJ? How can I connect with this organization? How can I connect with this organization so that we can pull our resources together to be able to ensure and allow everyone to be able to access their breath and breathe. People want to breathe. That's the word on the street.
This is Vaccine 101. All of the news and the hype that's been going on around the vaccine. The truth is this: you need to make a decision about what matters to you most when deciding if you want the vaccine to be part of your plan to have a healthy immune system. Vaccines are a powerful way to get your immune system ready to fight. So the vaccines that are available to us right now for COVID-19 are very special vaccines that have been in the works for literally decades. They are vaccines that are similarly a little package of genetic information, just like a virus, except for the genetic information, the code, the recipe that's in these vaccines is only for one tiny little piece of the virus. It's for the piece of the virus that is responsible for letting it attach to our cells and cause infection, the spike protein. Once it gets into your muscle, your cells take it in and makes copies of that information in the form of a little tiny piece of that spike protein. Then your immune system says, hey, whoa, that's not part of me, you gotta go. And we make proteins that tag onto the spike protein, and we create cells that are able to recognize and fight and get that foreign thing out of us.
This is what matters to me most.
When it comes to the plans for the COVID-19 vaccination, what matters to me most is making sure that our vulnerable population is served properly. A lot of our seniors are very vulnerable to this virus, and I'm hoping that they would receive access to the vaccination first and not last.
So there are a few vaccines that have been approved by the FDA for COVID-19. And what matters the most to me is that people can get vaccinated for COVID regardless of their ability to pay. We've seen that poor people are the most likely to die from COVID, and that should not be a barrier for people to get vaccinated. So my hope and wish is that the makers of the vaccine will have some sort of program in place so that cost will not be a barrier.
You know, since this pandemic, the one thing that we have provided is a safe haven for people, especially for the community that we serve. Our practice is 98% African American. So I tell you this, it's really big because during the height of the pandemic, we were still open. One of the things that we do every single morning is we stand in prayer. Anyone that has an appointment at 9 o'clock, they come into the place, we stand, we hold hands, and we pray together. And I can tell you this, that we had a lot of people that showed up for prayer because, one, churches were closed, still people were not in contact with each other, so that everything with that social interaction that actually helps with healing has been lost. So for us to be that safe haven for people, offering prayer, just offering the education that we need to understand how the body works, because that's something that's not being talked about. A lot of the conversation is what the body is incapable of doing, and not what the body is capable of doing. There's a lot that goes on that we have to understand when it comes to health and wellness. A lot of that is our responsibility, each individual person's responsibility. So health and wellness has to fall on your own shoulders with the help of those healthcare professionals that have the knowledge, that has the information to share. And that's what we do in our practice. So not only are we offering chiropractic, we offer rehabilitation. We have a physical therapist in our building. We have massage therapy. We have reflexology. We even have a lab where someone can come in and get lab work and don't have to wait in their doctor's office or at LabCorp somewhere to get their lab work. So we're looking at everything from a natural and holistic approach. The things that have already been put within us, just understanding how do we help the body to self-maintain, self-regulate, self-sustain in order to get us through this thing.
This is what matters to me most.
95% of the unhoused population in St. Louis are black people. So they out here ready to fight for black lives. So come on, let's save some black lives. Let's feed some people. Let's love on some people. Lift up those with the least among us. And they was here for it.
Can we just like absorb that for a second? I mean, the connection between the access to basic things like housing and food, and the way that you cannot separate those basic rights from what you mean when you say Black Lives Matter. Fast forward now, it's year 2 of the pandemic. How do you see the energy around the vaccine starting to impact the work that you're doing now?
Well, I see that I see people getting more energized to want to come back out. I see my young folks, they went to go get their vaccine, where some of them were saying, I'm not doing it. I'm like, but if you're going to keep doing this work, you got to do it,
Okay, so let's we got to really talk about that for a second, right? But it sounds like they were able to balance, almost do the math of the risks and the benefits, and it made them feel like that was the powerful choice for them to make.
Right.
Is that same choice available to the people you're serving? Are you seeing the vulnerable and the unhoused getting access to the vaccine like that?
I don't see that, and so that's problematic for me. Because they are vulnerable, they out there, and they need that, and a lot of them have health issues. So they're not getting what they need. Like you said earlier, when they go in the hospital, they're not always treated the way they should be treated. So they don't, a lot of people, and I always said this over and over and over again, when you come across an unhoused person, first thing you need to do is recognize their humanity. And that's a problem. They don't even see them as human.
Clearly, even though the pandemic that we have seen has been one about viruses and infections, the real impact of this pandemic has been in our well-being and specifically in our mental health.
No doubt about it.
What is the word on the street right now when it comes to those concerns? What are people thinking about and worried about the most?
I think more than anything is just really this dynamic approach to creating a new normal and what that's actually going to look like, or if such a thing will take place, like what is normal?
What is in your practice in terms of things that are allowing you to get those mental health resources to young men, young kids, young people, and tell me a little bit about how COVID has changed what you're getting access to in your practice.
Yeah, so we're now understanding that we need to, there's several different entry points. So for people in and from Black and brown spaces, typically the entry point to mental health, the field of mental health, is through education. And that is at the elementary level or middle school level. I mean, our exposure to counselors and social workers or whatever have you is through some kind of academic behavior, some kind of intervention that's taking place in school that gets us in front of a counselor or a social worker or whatever have you. Now that we have a really wide open view of what's taking place, now we're seeing these different entry points with regard to all kinds of issues, church hurt and, socioeconomic issues and all these different things where this access to mental health services is necessary for a variety of different reasons. Again, just like you stated, just our overall just health and well-being. It doesn't necessarily have to be to address a problem of some kind, but now we're just talking about maintenance, like going to the gym. Like, our nutrition and all these things, our approach to mental wellness needs to be on par with those things as we take care of ourselves holistically.
What do you see driving the health and well-being, the mental health, the mental well-being, as you say, of our community?
Anxiety is huge. Yeah. Anxiety issues because, people are trying to figure out what's like what they can touch, taste, hear, feel, and smell. We talk about vaccinations, all these things, returning to school, the different plans, there'll still be kids who are working, remotely or whatever have you. And people are just trying to put two pieces, like everything's a 10,000 piece puzzle right now, and people are just trying to find two pieces that go together that make sense to try to, figure out what life is going to look like, because it's not going to be the same.
As a trauma surgeon, I have met people in the midst of highly anxious situations, and that anxiety from not knowing, having incomplete information, and nobody even maybe sometimes being able to tell you what to expect. It creates a need to make decisions without adequate information. And so much of what we've been talking about on this podcast is, how do people make decisions? They make decisions based on what matters to them most.
When it comes to the plans of the COVID-19 vaccine, what matters to me most is how the vaccine went through the FDA emergency use authorization and the ways in which the efficiency was cleared. And before, outside of just COVID-19, there's been studies that show how industry-funded trials differ greatly from independent review studies, and these industry study trials exaggerated the effects in favor of the product that their sponsor wanted to pass. And so it's a little hard for me to trust the FDA review process if it's already been shown how industry-funded trials exaggerate the effects, and how the FDA is, a lot of it is funded by Big Pharma.
Look, I know this is heavy, and it's a lot to consider. It's hard to know what information to trust. It's hard to know who to believe. But here's the thing that you have that no one can take from you. You have your power to make a choice for yourself. And the best choice you can make is an informed choice. By understanding the virus, your immune system, and the vaccines, you can make a plan for you and your family that honors what matters to you most as we strive to thrive in the era of COVID-19.
What Matters to Me Most is a presentation of PrepareSTL. PrepareSTL is a collaboration powered by the Missouri Foundation for Health in partnership with the Regional Health Commission, the City of St. Louis, St. Louis County, and other community health organizations to help prepare all St. Louisans for the effects of the COVID-19 response, how to stop its spread, and how to survive the pandemic physically, emotionally, and economically. Don't miss an episode of the What Matters to Me Most podcast with Dr. LJ Punch, trauma surgeon and founder of the TSTL, for the latest conversations on COVID-19 and STL, vaccines, racial health disparities, physical and emotional well-being, and more. Download the podcast at PrepareSTL.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Executive producer, Vector Communications. What Matters to Me Most is another positive production of Rare Gem Productions.